So it is very fitting to have such a conference on the International Women's Day. And I would like to thank the organizer for putting this conference together with a focus on UNSC 1325. Without doubt, this resolution adopted in the year 2000 was an important achievement and a landmark, not only for women, but for the world ahead. As a Palestinian male, I wholeheartedly embrace this resolution that supports women's agency in prevention and resolution of conflict and positive contribution towards peace and security in peace building. I view it as an integral element of a holistic approach to the relentless quest towards gender equality and increased representation of women at all decision-making levels and on adopting a gender perspective in handling issues related to peace and security. However, today, the genocide on Gaza entered its 6th month. Imagine, 6 months. As a Palestinian, I have many questions that need to be addressed. The genocide that is happening in Gaza raised in us many doubts, skepticism, and suspicions. The genocide that is unfolding in Gaza as we speak was like a magnifying glass that helped us to see things much clearer. Allow me to share this morning few of these issues with you. The first issue has to do with Article 11 of the resolution that, I quote, emphasizes the responsibility of all states to put an end to impunity and to prosecute those responsible for genocide, crime against humanity, and war crimes, including those relating to sexual and other violence against women and girls. And in this regard, stresses the need to exclude these crimes where feasible from amnesty provisions. Clearly, all states have failed to meet their obligations related to Palestine. All states have failed in preventing a genocide against the Palestinian people in general and to protect the Palestinian women in particular. The international community has allowed and even enabled Israel to murder over 32,000 Palestinians, 70,000 of whom were women and their children. 2 mothers are murdered every hour. To displace more than once over 1 million women and girls, and to wipe off entire families that no more exist. The same United Security Council failed in providing a minimum of special needs for the 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza. Imagine if you are a pregnant woman right now in Gaza and you go for 5 months under these circumstances. They failed to provide a minimum space for the 20,000 women who delivered in the last 5 months, and any support for the over 5,000 women who became widowed after October 7th. This is not all. We don't know yet when this genocide will end. How many people will die from ill nutrition, from famine, from how many diabetes or patient with kidney failure will die for the lack of medicine or dialysis machines, with 30 out of the 36 hospitals out of service? How many will die of cancer from the chemicals and bombs dropped and polluted land, air, and sea? How many men, children, and women will have to live with traumas and depression for the rest of their lives? These women are not numbers. They are precious human beings with agency. They were doing exactly what UNSC 1325 calls for, and the United Nations Security Council failed to protect them. Allow me to introduce 3 of those women connected to our work. This is Hiba Zakut, an accomplished artist. that was murdered with her family in an Israeli airstrike on their house on October 13th, 2023. This is artist Halima al-Kahlout that we trained in art therapy and psychosocial intervention that was murdered by another Israeli airstrike on October 27th, 2023. And you can see in the picture, actually, in the last war, 2 years ago on Gaza, she was providing in our center art therapy interventions for the children who were traumatized in the war. And this is Suad al-Sabbahi, one of our over 15 volunteers, herself displaced from northern Gaza and she survived, is now a refugee in Rafah. Yet she refused to see herself as a mere victim and engaged in bringing some calm and smiles into the hundreds of thousands of children displaced in Rafah. Palestinian women are living the resolution and are not waiting for a foreign state to teach them agency. They teach life, sir. They teach life, even in a context of death. As Palestinians, we have our issue with United Nations Security Council resolutions at large. Our skepsis is nothing new, but had increased and accumulated over the years. Since 1947, the United Nations has issued, imagined, 189 resolutions on Palestine. 189 resolutions. These resolutions were supposed to provide us with peace and security. However, after 77 years, the Palestinian people have never been as far from peace and security as now. The UN Security Council 181 on the partition of Palestine did not prevent the Nakba from happening. And Resolution 242-338 proved to be not more than empty words. And after 30 years of a peace process, we ended with neither peace nor process. And after 5 months of a genocidal war on Gaza, the UN Security Council failed to agree on a ceasefire. Mere ceasefire, for God's sake. 3 ceasefire resolutions were voted by the United States, 3 out of 85 vetoes that were evoked to grant Israel impunity and to prevent Palestinians from having a secure life, statehood, or even sufficient humanitarian aid. The UN Security Council proved to provide security not for the occupied, but for the occupier. It was hurtful to see the United States ambassador to the United States, Ms. Linda Thomas Greenfield, an African-American woman whose ancestors have experienced slavery, oppression, racism, and rape, to be the one raising her hand at the Security Council meeting against a permanent ceasefire. What this tells us is this: though the Security Council resolution contained noble statements, the whole United Nations systems, an accomplishment of the post-Second World War era, is in a sense a colonial system that gives 4 European and settler colonial countries out of 5 permanent members veto right. The United Nations structure that ensures a privileged position to colonial European power at the expense of the global South that was exploited by exact those powers who enjoy the veto right. When South Africa, a nation that endured apartheid and experienced settler colonialism and genocide, came to aid the Palestinians by going to the International Court of Justice, it was not a surprise that only former settler colonial states who committed themselves genocide came to defend Israel. After 5 months of constant bombing, the UN Security Council was not able even to secure its released international humanitarian law and to provide secure and sustainable access to food, clean water, and medical supplies, allowing Israel to weaponize starvation as a genocidal tool. Women's rights are part and parcel of human rights. The Human Rights Charter, another accomplishment of the post-Second World War era, is something we cherish and don't want to miss. However, our experience in the last years, and especially in the last months, has taught us to ask the question, if this charter that claims universality was mainly geared towards the white European, at least a comparison with how the West deals with the Ukraine versus Palestine force us to ask such question. Maybe you saw yesterday Biden using 12 minutes in his speech to talk about Ukraine and not one single sentence on Gaza. And he asked Russia to pay for the damage and destruction done in Ukraine, and they never ask Israel to pay for anything for what they do in Palestine. So people are talking about double standard, right? And the double standard of Western politicians is crying to heaven. Yet, for me, this is one and the same standard. Colonial standards that provide impunity for colonial powers and use human rights selectively to promote their own colonial ambitions and goals. How ironic that the so many Western countries that have invested billions of dollars in Palestine to promote human rights and to strengthen civil society have abandoned the Palestinians by cutting their funds to Palestinian human rights organizations as one example. The cut sometimes came as a result of these organizations showing clearly that what Israel is doing on both sides of the Green Line is, according to the United Nations' own definition, nothing but a crime of apartheid. Allow me to share with you Israel's latest apartheid policy in the West Bank. You can see it here in the pictures. There are now main roads in the West Bank that Israel closes between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. every day so that Jewish settlers can use these roads without seeing Palestinian cars on the roads. This is in addition to the existing segregated road system in the West Bank. Imagine our professors and students cannot come to the university at 8 in the morning because these roads are closed. And so we have to shift everything starting after 11. I mean, in the 21st century, and I haven't heard any country talking about this, by the way. Palestinian women in Israel who dared to raise their voice and assume agency were detained by Israel. Like you see here to the right, Dalal Abu Amni, a very famous singer, for a post on social media. She was put. And to the left, you have Professor Nadila Shalhoub, a colleague who actually was asked by the president of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem to resign because she wrote about the situation of kids in Gaza. This is one of our students, Shams Badran. She lives by Akko. Actually, she was detained. You can see on the picture on the right. She was taking a class at our university online during October. She's a film student. When the Israeli military came and detained her while she was taking class on Zoom. And they took her mobile and her computer. So, I mean, over 6,700 young people were actually detained in the West Bank since October 7th. Even worse, countries like Germany, who showed repeatedly its concern over the over-shrinking space for civil society organizations in the Arab world, shrank themselves the civil society space in their own countries once people started showing solidarity with the besieged Palestinian people in Gaza. It went even thus far to silence and censor Palestinian Christian voices. This is one example. Today is the International Women's Day, and there is also the International Women's Day of Prayer. I'm not sure if this is something celebrated here in Denmark. And every year, a country is chosen to write a liturgy and to talk about the situation in their country. Now, Palestine was chosen 2017, back in Brazil, by the committee. And so today they were supposed to have their liturgy celebrated everywhere in the world. Interestingly enough, you can see there to the right, below, some German churches have these posters with Iranian women saying, they don't want to celebrate the liturgy with Palestinian women. Even worse, some churches in Germany actually took the right to censor this liturgy and to change it and to write liturgy in the name of the Palestinian women because they know better how to pray. Can you imagine? This is done by a church. So what we need is for the United Nations Security Council to walk the talk, thus ensure accountability by the states that keep providing the powerful with impunity. Women need to see action taken by the Security Council against these violations. It is thus the credibility of the United Nations Security Council that is at stake. So the task ahead of us is therefore to decolonize the United Nations Security Council, not to defund UNRWA, but to decolonize the United Nations Security Council so that it will be a place where nations are united to strive for peace based on justice and security for the meek and not only for the white men and privileged people and nations. I'm aware that this task will need time and effort, but Denmark, who is currently campaigning for a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council for 25-26, could play a role towards this noble goal. While working on decolonizing the United Nations Security Council, I suggest an advice given by a countryman 2,000 years ago. I guess you know this countryman. In Jesus' parable of the unjust judge, we hear of a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. It's exactly like the Security Council. And on the other hand, there was a widow, like the Palestinians, who kept coming to him with a plea, grant me justice against my adversary. For a long time, he refused, like the United Nations Security Council. But finally, hope that day will come, he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me. So this is exactly what we need to do. We need to keep bothering these politicians in Denmark, in Europe, in the United States, until they are fed up with us. Okay? I salute those women and men who keep pouring into the streets of Copenhagen, London, Amman, Washington, Jakarta, South Africa, demanding a free Palestine, refusing to be bystanders, but claiming agency by knocking on the consciousness of politicians and leaders, raising their voice and demanding justice for the oppressed. They know that they too have a role to play in context of conflict, and more so in times of genocide. So it's not only the women in Palestine need to play a role in times of conflict. The women in Denmark need to do exactly that. At the end, allow me to show you this very short film that our teachers have produced before October 7th that speaks indirectly to this resolution, because Palestinian women should have the last word. Thank you very much.
أحرار لا للعبودية، أحرار في الإنسانية، رغم الآلام لدينا أحلام ستبدد الظلام، شمس النهار، أحرار أحرار أحرار.
أنا الحجة صفية حماد من قرية بتير. أنا كامرأة فلسطينية بالرغم من كل الصعوبات اللي بتواجهنا في الرواح على أرضنا، إلا إني صامد في أرضي وعمرتها وزرعتها زيتون. إحنا في بتير عائلات كبيرة وصامدين مع بعضنا وبنعاون بعضنا، عشان هذا الاحتلال عمره ما بيقدر يكرب على أرضنا ولا يأخذها منا.
فاتن نيروخ، فنانة فلسطينية تشكيلية في مجال الخزف. بحاول من خلال الأعمال اللي بقدمها إبراز جماليات البيئة الفلسطينية والتركيز على الأصناف اللي كتير تأثرت نتيجة الممارسات الإسرائيلية من بناء الجدار، الطرق الالتفافية، المستعمرات، والتعريف العالم والناس بالجماليات الموجودة اللي إحنا افتقدناها بشكل كتير كبير. أنا كصاحبة مشروع بيشتغل عندي عدد من السيدات، بنشتغل مع بعض بشكل تكاملي، كل واحدة منا بتقوم بعمل معين أو بدور معين في العمل، لحتى بالنهاية بنصل لمنتج جميل بيعكس فننا وثقافتنا.
أنا داليا مرة، عمري 30 سنة. دوري أنا كمعلمة حماية التعليم من التهويد، حماية التاريخ الفلسطيني والجغرافيا الفلسطينية من التزوير، وكذلك منع أي محاولات للتدخل في العملية التربوية. وأنا كامرأة فلسطينية رغم كل شيء بعيشه من صعوبات وتحديات، إلا إنه رح أضل أسعى لحتى نوصل لمجتمع خالي من العنف.
عمري 16 سنة، بلعب مع فريق ديار النسوي في فلسطين. احنا بنات ديار عم نلعب كلنا سوا، عم بنروح وبنيجي بنقضي كل الوقت مع بعض، تعلم التعاون بالشجاعة، وكلنا عشان نحقق اشي حلو. الفوتبول هي مش بس رياضة جسدية، هي كمان رمز للصمود.
أنا إميليا المصوع، عمري 15 سنة. أنا بحب التمثيل كتير، ومن عمري 6 سنين عم بعمل الإشي اللي أنا بحبه واللي هو المسرح. بحلم كفتاة فلسطينية إنه يكون في إلي تأثير بالمجتمع. بتمنى إني أعمل هذا التأثير بدون ما الاحتلال يكون موجود، بدون خوف، بدون قلق، بدون ما يكون في قيود أو حتى أفكار نمطية على الفتاة الفلسطينية.
برغم تضييق الاحتلال اللي بضيق علينا، إنه يظلوا الشباب هذول صامدين في أرضهم وما يفرطوا فيها ولا يخسروها.
بتمنى إنه يتم تسليط الضوء على السيدات اللي بيشتغلوا في المجال الحرفي أو الفني، وإبراز أعمالهم بشكل كبير، والمساعدة على نشر أعمالهم في الوطن أو في الخارج.
بحلم إني أصير لاعبة مشهورة كتير ولاعبة كرة قدم، وبمثل فلسطين وبمثل بلدي، وأنا كتير مبسوطة في هذا المجال.
بحب إنه أنا وكل الأطفال اللي بعمري نعمل هذا التأثير بحرية، بمشاعرنا الحلوة، بأفكارنا اللي نحكي عنها واللي نعبر عنها بدون ما يكون في سلطة ولا قيود علينا.